Think about your taper weeks as not rest, but recovery. And you're thinking about it that way because you're still training, so you're not at complete rest, and you're tapering down to your event and to your race. And you're still keeping up some intensity, so you're training for that race and training race specific, but you're dropping the volume way down, and that's allowing you to taper, and that's allowing you to recover and for your body to get all those adaptations so you can have a stronger and faster race from your training and going into that tapering. Tapers usually are about 3 weeks. Some people can do a long taper up to 4 weeks. I think that's a little too long. Typically, I like a 3-week taper for a long endurance event like an ultra run or an Ironman, and then 2 weeks for shorter events is usually typically a good taper to work in that recovery, drop that volume while keeping some race specific training and some high intensity so your body's prepared to race at its best and to perform at its best. And when you're looking at tapering into a race, nutrition is really key, and you want to eat well-balanced meals throughout those weeks that you're tapering, focusing on keeping a balance of protein, healthy complex carbohydrates, vegetables, and healthy fats throughout that tapering cycle and preparing to go into that race. And that will make sure you're still having a lot of high energy, you're getting all your nutrients in and all your vitamins, and you're going to perform at your best for that race and perform your best on race day. When you're looking at carb loading the week of a race, I believe that carb loading is not the best way to look at it. More, you're just upping your carbs to get ready for your race and topping off your glycogen stores and making sure your body's ready for the race. And what that looks like at about 3 days before, you just start adding some extra carbs. So that might mean an extra spoon of rice with your well-balanced meal. It might mean a potato or an extra piece of whole grain toast, and just adding a little extra carbs on top of your regular meals about 3 days to the event. One of the important things with carb loading is don't overdo it the night before. There's nothing worse than overeating and feeling bloated and waking up the next morning like you still have a lot of food in your stomach and you just ate too much. So I like to focus on my highest carb day. If you think about marathoners and the tradition of a spaghetti dinner or a pasta dinner 2 nights before, and that really puts those carbs into my body. In essence, it loads those carbs. And then the night before the race, I have a well-balanced meal with a little extra carbs, but I make sure I don't overeat. I make sure I'm eating something that sits really well and something that I know that I've ate time and time my whole life and I've never had any issues with. And I'm gonna wake up the next day, I'm gonna feel good, and I'm gonna feel race ready. When you're looking at tapering into your race morning, you wanna wake up early and have a good pre-race breakfast, and this should be mostly carbohydrates, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, depending on what time you wake up. If you're eating 2 to 3 hours before the race, you can eat a whole breakfast and be pretty good. As you get closer to the race, you're gonna wanna eat things again that sit well in your stomach. I'm a big fan of sweet potato pancakes. Oatmeal is a good go-to for me, or even if it's really in a crunch, a piece of whole grain toast and some fruit like a banana or even a bagel. And those top off those carbohydrates, those glycogen stores, and they make sure you're race ready. And don't forget about hydration during your taper period. Hydration is so important. And it doesn't start the day of the race. It doesn't even start the day before. You should focus on staying hydrated the entire week leading up to a big race. And that just looks like waking up, having a glass of water, carrying a water bottle around with you, sipping it throughout the day, prioritizing having glasses of water with each meal, and having a glass of water before you go to sleep. As you get closer to the race, again around 3 days before, you can start adding in electrolytes to make sure you have your electrolytes topped off, and you can even have some electrolytes early on to make sure you're building up those electrolytes and you're race ready and hydrated. At the start line, I usually do like to drink an electrolyte and a sports drink that has some carbohydrates in it, some calories, and that just helps me top off right before the race. And I'll also 20 minutes before typically have some sort of sports nutrition, like a gel or a block or a chew, something similar to that. And that's again just to get me ready for the race. It's making sure I'm going in with a full tank of energy, and it really sets up the day for my nutrition time in throughout the race. And then throughout the race, I like to stay hydrated. You don't want to overhydrate. A bottle of water an hour, that's about 22 to 26 ounces. I like to have carbohydrates, sports nutrition, again, those bars, those chews, those blocks, the gels, whatever your sports nutrition choice is. I typically like to load them up every hour. Some people do better having their sports nutrition every half hour. That's really a personal preference. And I get it both through those supplements as well as through my sports drinks in my water bottle or sipping on the ones from the aid station. And that looks anywhere from 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour, and that's typically what most people can tolerate. When you start getting on the higher side, you may experience some gut issues. When you're looking at it in calories, a lot of the supplements list with the calories is you're looking at anywhere from 150 on the low side to 300 calories an hour, making sure you're getting those in every hour for events that are over 2 hours to help fuel the finish. And when you look at fuel the finish, it's not fueling for that moment, right? I hear people say, oh, I wasn't hungry or I wasn't thirsty. And in that moment you weren't, but what you need to do is you need to have that discipline to know you still have multiple hours possibly depending on the race distance, and you're not fueling for that moment, you're fueling for that hours later, and you're topping off your carbohydrates, your glycogen, and your fuel. Think about it as topping off your fuel tank like a gas tank, and that's going to allow you to continue through the race and finish strong. Because there's nothing worse getting to that point, which is typically around 2 hours, maybe 20 miles, where you bonk, and that's your body getting depleted of fuel when you're racing at a higher level than just fat oxidation, and where it's relying more on carbohydrates. So you want to make sure you're refueling during your race, and remember, you're fueling for the finish. You're not fueling for that moment. You're hydrating for the finish, not for that moment. And especially with hydration, we sweat a lot. We sweat more than we can actually take in, more than our bodies can absorb. So typically we do finish our events in a dehydrated state, and that's why it's so important to get that 22 to 26 ounces of sports drinks and water in per hour, because that's what our bodies can absorb. Most human bodies cannot absorb over 32 ounces in an hour, and if you start drinking more than that, you may have some gut issues. So stick with your plan, come up with a fuel and nutrition plan. If you need help, talk to me. You can contact me anytime. I'm happy to talk to you. And then the last part of that race week, right, is post-nutrition. So again, once you finish the race, you're depleted. You've depleted a lot of your nutrients in your system. If you've given a hard effort, you're probably partially dehydrated. So you want to make sure you drink some water, drink a sports drink, make sure you're getting those electrolytes back in your body. And then you also want to replenish your carbohydrates. You want to get some protein in you, and then later some healthy fats and some of those vegetables, those fibrous vegetables. And that's to fuel your body back up, help it recover, help you recover through the days after, and making sure you're replenishing everything you depleted during that race so you can have the best recovery possible and be able to get right back to training and racing after you've had a recovery period after a big event. So that covers from tapering all the way through your race and what you need to focus on during your taper period and during your race week. And besides that, just making sure you're visualizing a race, staying positive, talking to yourself with a positive mental mindset. Talk to yourself like your best friend would talk to you. Don't get into a negative place, and rely on some mantras and positive self-talk and visualization. And that's all that's going to help ensure that you have a great race, have a great time leading up to race week. You're going to have a great race and you're going to recover well from that race. Again, I'm Coach Joe Beckerley with Fuel to Finish. I'm an endurance athlete myself. I'm an ultra runner and triathlete, and I've coached hundreds of triathletes and ultra runners over the years. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here for all athletes to answer any questions and help you on your journey and guide you as much as I can. That's really my goal, is to help people every day, and I focus on helping endurance athletes and people that care about their health as well as their performance like you.